Right, we're live. Welcome, everyone, to Intelligent Speech 2020. My name is Maisha. I'll be the admin and moderator. We're glad you've chosen to join us in this particular session. Just a quick rundown at the start. If you want to ask a question for the Q&A at any point, just put your question in the Ask a Question section down right at the bottom. Just click there and type your question, and we should be able to pick it for the Q&A. And then any general feedback or any general thoughts, please feel free to all throughout use the chat at the right-hand side. And I do hope you enjoy. So I will now hand over to our speaker.
Thank you. Greetings, comrades. Greetings, comrades, and I apologize immensely about my. Wait, I'm going to turn this around. I think somehow. Now it doesn't help. See, I'm Kristaps Andjresons from the Eastern Border. You might have listened to my show. I look so terrible because my computer's webcam just decided to give up the ghost. So I'm broadcasting from my phone, and I'm reading the chat right now on my computer screen. So when you're going to have any questions, just type them in the chat, and I will be able to answer here. But yeah, it does look way more terrible than it actually is. I have to be really far from my phone to look nice. I hope you'll forgive me. I am, however, on the Eastern Border. After all, I live in Latvia. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about my recent research, because I am now doing an academical research study for Karsava administration, which basically means describing. I really have to find a way how to hold this, and how can you all hear me? Can you hear me? I hope you can. I'm doing a research about how it was like to live next to the border of the Western world here, how it was like for living in the Latvian SSR during the Soviet era. And you see, the Baltic states were the westernmost part of the Soviet Union, so this is where all the smuggling went down on. Thank you again. Because, like I said, I'm literally holding my phone next to my screen where I can see myself, and the quality is just atrocious. But I'm doing this thing because we smuggled in cars, car parts, jeans, denim, and everything. And if people would, sell off jeans and other smuggled Soviet goods in other parts of the Soviet Union, that would be looked at as super suspicious, because those parts were far from the sea. Meanwhile, as you know, Liepāja and Riga, our capital, they're both ports on the Baltic Sea, and they were both used as points for both cruise ships and cargo ships. It's Liepāja harbor, actually, from where the nice little rockets were sent to Cuba during the missile crisis. Because, yeah, we're going to be talking about pirates of the USSR. So these whole crews of various merchant vessels would participate in this, because seeing jeans and having a pair was so crazy and insanely expensive. A pair of jeans cost about 200 rubles. At that point, the average salary of an engineer who was, a civil engineer, as Ben is one of the organizers of all of this situation, there was about 120 rubles. But so there were all these people who were sailing, well, sailors approximately. So they had whole compartments, and I interviewed some. And it wasn't like some single person on a ship trying to smuggle in goods, which were, like I said, jeans, also women's tights. Yep, tights, leggings, and porn mags. Pornography was officially completely prohibited in the Soviet Union. One of the best ways how to get it was obviously make profit, bringing them in. See, when the sailors went to the sea, they often formed tiny little cliques with the sailors they had gone out before, because on every ship, at least 1/3 of the people there who were technically sailors were actually KGB agents. So a complex system was created together with the captain and the KGB agents, where everyone had to basically argue on how they would split the loot and how they would get it through port. So these sailors, they would just bring some cargo to East Germany or something. They would go out on the shore with their limited dollars. They would then purchase insane amounts of denim, porn mags, rock and roll music, because it truly was rock and roll and porn that brought the Soviet Union down, and then they would bring it on board. The following issue was the fact that sometimes, sudden nice men from other KGB departments, those guys who were not in on the deal, would come and check the ship. So literally every possible compartment of the ship had double bottoms. Sometimes porn mags were stuffed into iron boxes welded into the engine. Sometimes even the crazier things happened was the fact that when this random checkup from different departments of the KGB came on board, if they were, for example, in Hanover or some East German port, they would literally feed vodka in insane amounts and bribe all the KGB agents. And there have been studies about the fact that so that these smuggled goods could come back to the Soviet Union, the local prostitutes were hired, but then those prostitutes were then paid to keep the guys in check, totally drunk, then photoed, which then could be used to blackmail those checking KGB agents so that everything could go through to port. After all of this total insanity of purchasing goods, the sailors went back. And previously to their voyage, they would have to exchange all their rubles into, well, depending on the country where they went, into the, well, cash, so that they could buy stuff for them and their families. It wasn't illegal to buy stuff for personal use. It was absolutely illegal to bring anything in. So back in the Port Authority, again, with nice little dealings with the KGB agents and literally giving away half of your stuff, of the jeans, rock and roll music, porn mags, high-quality raincoats, mind you. High-quality raincoats were just crazy demand. Then they would just go out and bring them out and then resell them either personally, but then they could, get arrested, or just to some well-organized black market organizer that would appear in the so-called Latgalita. In the meantime, those very same sailors had to take in all of their foreign currency, and they would exchange it for so-called boni. Travis Joe knows what boni is. He spoke about the special boni market, and that's where all the imported goods from outside the Soviet Union were sold. So if you were a sailor, then you could go into this special store, which was completely closed from the outside. There was nothing in the window. There was nothing visible. Everyone just knew where it was located. So you could go in there and purchase some goods for these boni, which were Western goods. But you had to show up with a sailor or prove that you were a relative of a sailor or something like that. Now, the thing is, some of these sailors made so much money from smuggling that they didn't need the boni. So what they did instead was, as it was really hard and you had to wait in line to get a car in the Soviet Union or some other goods, they would then trade their boni for foreign currency in case the Soviet Union collapsed, or they just traded their boni for people who, well, were too high ranking up in the society, like, not some common man from the street, but a director of a whole factory. They would then trade boni to them with extremely overpriced prices because these high up guys couldn't buy on the black market. And then they would personally go to the boni store and say, "Oh, no, that's my uncle. That's my uncle. So I totally vouch for him. He is allowed to purchase goods in this secluded store." But about the black market itself, you see, at one point, some smugglers from Far East decided to get in some fake denim because all these jeans were considered super rare and super expensive. So the test of whether or not you're cool as denim were real, whether or not you were among the cool dudes, was to check if they rip or not. So once you would have acquired for 200 rubles, which is more than a month's salary, through your through various means or whatever, you acquired your denim. First thing you did with them would be you took them outside, took a brick, and started rubbing them all over because they had to look worn. Because obviously, through rock bands and whatever, and through various smuggled images of various rock bands, we knew that real denim were not the brand new ones. We knew that they were the worn ones. So people would just rub them all over. But there was even crazier story about the smuggling that actually happened, because you see, and I know that this story comes from a British listener of mine who started listening to my show, and then he told me a personal account with meeting with the Soviet smugglers. See, there was a huge fishing operation going on in the North Sea, and they technically weren't allowed to have any foreign currency, as they weren't, exporting goods outside the Soviet Union. They were just fishermen. However, they had, in the previous arrangements, as the fishermen tended to speak to each other through radio, well, and most likely through personal contacts up in the North Sea. This happened near the Scottish coast up there. The Soviet sneaky fishermen had completely disassembled and brought on board in various boxes and hiding places a whole Zhiguli car, Model 6. One of them. Oh yeah, by the way, I see that David has written that in the West you used to put rocks in washing machines to create that look. We didn't have washing machines that circulated around. We had the semi-automatic ones. You would still need to do the rubbing by hand. These full automatic washing machines became an extreme thing that we were really, we could see them in the smuggled in mags, and we were like, no way, because we had something called semi-automatic ones. Anyway, these guys take a whole Zhiguli car, they pack it in, completely disassembled, box it up, and they have a trade deal set up. And for what you ask, well, here comes the second unofficial currency of the Russian black market. See, the thing is, rubles were only useful inside the Soviet Union. They were valuable, and you could buy stuff from them. But everyone knew that, well, they are worthless pieces of paper. Because the government literally stated that $3 per 1 ruble, that's the official exchange rate, and nothing else really happened. So the real currency, and again, everything is state controlled. So if you want to get your car fixed, wait in line for the government serviceman to arrive. If your plumbing is leaking, wait in line. Always wait in line to get anything done, because there are no private services available. And if you want to buy some materials, for example, to fix up your own house or fix your own car, well, that takes parts. Parts are a deficit. You have to find a way somehow how to do things. And this is specifically in the late Soviet era, when the perestroika started and the smuggling got extremely going. The main currency was vodka, because there was dry law. Now, if something is happening on the Scottish coast, and we have a whole Zhiguli car, yeah, what happened was that they, in the previous meeting, 3 months before, on this fishing trip, had arranged for 3 whole boxes of Scottish whiskey. So, in the middle of the night, my source was on the Scottish side this time. I sadly couldn't find any Soviet source, but I have a picture of the Zhiguli he acquired. 2 fishing boats deep in the North Sea, next to the Scottish coast, by small life-saving boats, exchanged box for box, parts of a whole Zhiguli Model 6 versus bottles of Hennessy, or whatever single whiskey. Hennessy is the best whiskey I know, and I don't even know if it's Scottish. I'm not a whiskey drinker myself. It's the beer zone here. Then, that Hennessy, it actually made it to Riga. And to and I bet, getting a whole Soviet car at UK at that time must have seemed like really cool. I mean, it was a cool thing. It was a Soviet car. No one else had it, right? But here, those 3 boxes of Hennessy became legendary, because for 2 bottles of Hennessy, our director of motor museum, because Riga has a nice motor museum in it. I've seen Stalin's Volga car and everything, and if you listen to my show, if you follow us on Facebook, a lot of pictures are there. For 2 bottles of this heresy smuggled in, someone acquired a beaten down Stalin's Volga, which they personal Stalin's Volga, which they then donated to the museum. A whole house, a dacha, summer house worth of materials were stolen from the government, purchased and acquired for just 3 bottles of heresy. A whole family was rehabilitated back, and because the children of those who were punished in Stalin's era, they were sometimes rehabilitated, but often they were afterwards in 70s prohibited to live 100 kilometers from major cities, or sometimes forced psychological treatment was put on to them, right? For a bottle of heresy, that could be sold. You cannot imagine how, well, I'm saying heresy again, but it's some really cool Scottish whiskey. And as I checked out, more and more legends happened for this Scottish heresy stuff. It could be traded, and again, let me remind you, the average monthly salary for a Russian engineer is 120 rubles. If you worked in Chernobyl plant, by the way, which is a state secret, then your average salary was 240 rubles per month, which is double that because, well, of course. In the black market, one such bottle of heresy, it never sold for rubles because it was considered to be too valuable to be even sold for rubles. It traded for 10 pairs of jeans, a whole bunch of porn mags, and a full discography at that time of Led Zeppelin. It was insane, specifically how music smuggling was considered the worst, because you can wear jeans, but porn mags ruin Soviet youth. And that capitalist rock music, oh boy, no. That's terrible and evil. It might bring evil capitalist ideas to our country if our children listen to rock music. But each of these smuggled records, which again were brought in by the ships or everything, or sometimes, purchased from NSC, they had the story on its own. And as sadly as I'm from my phone now and I can't share you my screen, I can tell you the short story of Bones. As I can see, I have about 2.5 minutes in my 20-minute presentation, then I'll do the Q&A. There was a thing called the Bones. It was named after the X-ray scans taken from hospitals. If you had, say, a vinyl of some Soviet record, smuggled in the Soviet Union record, what you would do is you would listen to it, but you wouldn't allow anyone else but you to touch the originals. You wouldn't share it. You would only keep it on the shelf. What you would do is, as some is that with books, replicate it. But the problem is KGB is active all the time. So how do you replicate vinyls? You can't really do that on original, normal vinyls. So you would go dump diving in hospitals, or again exchange vodka for used X-rays, people's chest scans or whatever scans, and they came in these large kind of plastic substance-like things. These were called the Bones, and people used these to replicate the records. And I've personally listened to Elvis Presley and the Rolling Stones, and also Sex Pistols on an X-ray scan made on a people's cavity. And they were very good because you could easily kind of roll them up in a tube and just put them in your jacket, and they would, most importantly, they would burn easily. And talking about currency, one other thing that wasn't smuggled but was used as currency was old-time Latvian money. See, we had Latvian, in the interwar, independent Latvia had these 5 lat, which at that time was about $10, by the way, 5 lat silver coins. I gave one to Dan Carlin when I met him at some point. But you weren't allowed to keep anything from old Latvia, so people made brooches out of them, these pendants that they would wear around. They were still made from silver, and they symbolized something. So those were also valued currency to trade for these porn mags, Because unlike porn mags and music, which you would get caught on and would be kind of punished for having illegal material, these things you could say, oh no, that's not currency, that's a memorabilia from my grandpa or grandma, and I'm extremely happy to basically just have that in my own possession. But yeah, my 20 minutes are up, and I'm going to take a look.
Should we move on to the Q&A section?
I can move on, yeah.
Antonios asks, what Western goods were in high demand in the USSR, but not in the Western countries?
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it. I can see that on my computer. I can see the question part. What Western goods were had in USSR, but not in Western countries? First of all, chewing gum. I guess you would consider chewing gum very kind of ordinary, but if you had some, that was the coolest thing ever. Secondly, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was insane. It was considered the ultimate good of the capitalist society. My grandma was a doctor, and she went on a visit abroad together in officially sanctioned tourism group, everything. And she went to Japan, and from there she brought back home a can of Pepsi, a single can of Pepsi, right? And after she went home, all of our family together, we were all invited together, and we had a single shot of Pepsi each. And then she would keep this Pepsi can, this 330 milliliters, this small Pepsi can, on her shelf, and she would show it to all of her friends. It wasn't just a matter of having drunk the Pepsi. It was a matter of pride that you're like one of those special people. Okay, I think that's answered now. I don't know how to poke it as answered.
I think just leave it in there, so we should move on to the next question.
Yeah. How effective was the black market? Did the Soviet government try to stop the flow of Western goods? Oh, they did, and they tried. But the black market was everywhere, all the time, because even unless you were the super higher ups, you couldn't get this at all. Everyone was into it. That's where this whole system of blatnoy came in. You always knew someone who knew someone, and if you were extremely honest and diligent at your work, and if you were among the so-called, because we're talking in Stalinist, of course, if you were found with smuggled goods, you were shot instantly or sent to gulags. But after that, after Khrushchev's era, when it started to thaw a bit, everyone was in. Everyone paid lip service. The higher ups thought everyone was like super reasonable, but there were even cases where like the local militia officers, there were some who truly believed communism and they wanted to build ideals, and they weren't in on it. They were like, people made jokes about it, and later on in the kind of Russian remake of Little Britain, we had it here. It was called Nasha Rasha. People even made fun of those, and organized crime actually hunted down and beat up honest policemen. And those honest policemen, militiaries at that time, who tried to stop the black market, they were often transferred and promoted to Siberia or some secret cities where they wouldn't miss the business from going around. So black market was ever present and awesome. Next one. Were the smugglers able to leverage their expertise and contracts to profit after the collapse of the USSR? Any relevant companies that emerged from some smuggling operations? Oh, thank you, Mario Capelli. Russian, we have nice Russian confirmation here. Yeah, that, by the way, comment from Nico. Comment from Nico is a very scary one, because when the system collapsed, these smugglers, these people who ran the black market, they were the only ones who knew how capitalism worked. And they were the people who bought up vouchers of privatization, because after Soviet Union fall, everything was nationalized, so the government gave us these privatization vouchers, just like in revolutionary France, which you could then redeem to buy your own house, buy some shares in some company or whatever. And they had some face value, but everyone was poor, and everyone was like, there was nothing in the stores. So a lot of these people who had been smugglers, they knew how this organized crime worked. So they had also acquired a lot of these foreign currency, which was extremely valuable at the time. So they just bought on these vouchers, invested into these apartments and everything, and it was a huge deal where really the people who used to be smugglers with their expertise became kind of the criminal overlord class of the 90s. And yeah, back here in this part, we had a lot of problems in the 90s with the criminal authorities until everything kind of settled down. But yeah, they formed the oligarch class, the super wealthy class, who just had immense wealth at the expense of your average everyday people due to their knowledge of the smuggling. And of course, a lot of oligarchs, well, in Russia, all of Yeltsin's family, by the way, was among them. And at least here in the Baltics, we had Einar Schlesers and Anders Schell, and they said that, oh, no, totally legit business. I just grew tulips in my back garden, and then I traded them for German radios, and then I sold them. Then I got super rich. That's why I own literally every company ever. And one other thing that they did was the fact that, when the G20 decided to give out loans to developing countries after the collapse of the Soviet Union, these guys used their leverage and connections to become on the committees who decided which businesses then would get these cheap loans, and through the system of buybacks and paybacks, they also basically stole a lot of money from our government. So a lot of people who were doing good in the Soviet era, they weren't really back. They really just moved into more criminal activities. Was any particular product regularly smuggled out of the Soviet Union, apart from, I suppose, Pripol? Raul asks. Yes, and it still is smuggled outside of Russia. 2 products, in fact. Totally legal. One, black sturgeon. Black sturgeon caviar. It is super rare. It is super expensive. And it's just, and they basically live only in Caspian Sea. And they're like, it's considered the best caviar ever, and it's totally illegal to bring it out of Russia. And secondly, whole people die because of this, because of the global warming and the thaw. In Siberia, people take massive loans, they mortgage their whole houses and everything, and then when something thaws, they go out in Siberia and they use water pumps and they try to smuggle out mammoth tusks, because one mammoth tusk is about $4,000 per kilogram. So if they can get a whole mammoth tusk from the permathaw and bring it to Chinese illegal markets, then they can pay for it. They can pay everything back, and all the team is super happy due to the lower salaries here.
Kristaps, I think we have a question just below Nico's question by David B, which says, "Did any of the oligarchs emerge from the underworld?"
Yeah, they did, and now most of them are in prison. But if you look at at least in Latvia, if you look in Russia, Vladimir Putin is one such oligarch. Stepping into political grounds here, but Vladimir Putin rose to prominence in St. Petersburg when he was a KGB agent in East Germany, and he was a colonel there. So he basically helped move goods and point them out as diplomatic things, so they wouldn't be, caught on. Then he helped St. Petersburg OPGA, which is organized crime thing called Ozero, or the Lake. He helped the organized group, the Lake, get smuggled goods from East Germany. And after that, in the 90s, he took control of the Western humanitarian aid to starving peoples of Russia, whereas, that he took over that part, and instead of just doling it out through Red Cross and other charitable organizations, he just massively profited off of people starving, and he sold off those humanitarian aid goods, thus getting him wealth and contacts. And using this Ozero segment, he was able to then provide Yeltsin with his safety, and now he's president and running whole Russia. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, back to the questions by Corey Hunker, I think you were down to. Have you seen the documentary Chuck Norris versus Communism about smuggling and duplicating VS tapes in Romania? And if so, what was your opinion on it?
I haven't seen the documentary, but I know what someone from Romania might be thinking about it, because that VHS tapes, I know that the smuggling happened. I haven't seen the documentary, sadly, but when the tapes were smuggled in, I know that Romania has the same person and Russia has another one. We just had in our case, one dude voicing all of it. Just one guy providing dubs with background noise all heard in, and he spoke in this nasal noise. And when someone spoke, it was like, and it continued like deep in the 90s. When I watched the first Matrix movie, imagine like, Neo speaking like, and then Neo shoots bullets. He should have drunk more vodka, because they really they blasted. They even added some comments into these tapes, and there was just this one person doing all the things, because they were like smuggled in video saloons. The smuggled videotapes were shown in like apartments, and there was a TV set up there with a VCR machine, and then people would come in, and then there were like two movies shown. Usually, the first one was some hardcore action, like Rambo or some other things. Rambo is just the first thing that comes to mind, or some comedy like Police Academy movies, and the second one was always porn, because porn also was super legal. And all of this was just voiced by a single person, and that was crazy. Oh yeah, and Corey here comments that all dubs were done by one woman with a high-pitched voice. I'm actively looking for that one guy in Russian, but if you can find that Romanian lady and if she speaks English, I want to have her interview, because there's everything happening like that. Okay, I'm seeing the questions are piling up, and we're 30 minutes in. So, corruption, official police. Now, it was called militia, and there was a corruption. There was a lot of corruption there, and some by necessity because of how Soviet system worked. Soviet criminal statute had Article 58, which basically drew this thing that you could get arrested for literally anything. It was so vague and so just crazy that there was this saying that there's a person will find the codex thing for him. People could always find you and arrest you, and so people had to like pay up sometimes just pay to the corrupt police officers. Another thing that would be extremely scary today, and is actually a very dark story, is the fact that homosexuality was illegal in the Soviet Union, and it was a criminally punishable act by years in prison. And that included, even if you were raped, you then would have to go to a KGB agent or a militionär and prove to them that you did not enjoy the act. Otherwise, because if it was a homosexual rape, and if the KGB agent doubted that and stated that no, comrade, looks like you enjoyed being raped in the bum, you could also go to prison for that. Moving on, what would have been a better way to go from communism to capitalism to avoid the problems Russia has now with corruption and oligarchy? I think some sort of a Western, more Western hands-on approach would be nice. We went kind of through slowly, but it was a time of chaos. That again, we really didn't want West to come in here. And a lot of people look at us in the Baltics as being very successful in this because we've moved into the EU, and I don't know, kind of stricter. I think Gorbachev could have done more, because he started his reforms, but they were too slow and too strict, and the whole apparatus was just too rotten. I sadly cannot describe a proper way. I think China is doing something similar with their reforms, but then again, they're still under their Communist Party rule, but they have capitalism. That's a very difficult question to answer. Was smuggling present in post-World War II USSR under Stalin, when it really did start picking up? Oh yes, it was totally present under Stalin, except it was, well, extremely persecuted. And then it was much less smuggling rather than trying to get out, as people were smuggling people out from the USSR. I'm answering to Eugen's question now because, well, I'm 33 minutes in, and I think I'm going to have to end in a few. So people smuggled other people out of the USSR because after, specifically here, the Eastern Bloc, well, Stalin comes in, then Hitler comes in, then Uncle Joe, Mr. Stalin, comes back, and people understood that, nope, they'd rather run. And the Baltic Sea was very popular for that. So with fishing boats, people were smuggled to Gotland and other isles to Sweden, and from there they were moved elsewhere. And also, I know a lot of things happened through Romania, but people smuggling abroad, people being smuggled out of the country was super important. And it went so far, specifically in the Stalinist era, which was extra rush and extra harsh, is the fact that at least in Liepaja, where also the military port was, and we have a quite a large coastline here in the Baltics, just, if you can, maybe look up Baltic states and look at our coastline. At least in Liepaja, all of the coastline that wasn't directly into the bay, but it was like into the open sea closest to Gotland, they sent specifically ordained people there with hose so that they would make these lines in the sand so that they could actually see where people would be just stepping over these lands where they were disturbing the sand. Everything was like calm. And let's not forget that up until 1956, even after the death of Stalin, there was a national independence movement in Latvia and the Baltics called Mežabrāļi, or the Forest Brothers, who really hoped that the United States and other allies would get get the thing going and would liberate the Baltic states. And they were they used this people smuggling to get in contact with people from POW camps who had been in the West, and then they organized this smuggling in Stalinist era through their foreign relatives, because at that point a lot of politicization happened, and a lot of those people were kind of deemed to be, hey, you're in the West now, from the POW camp, maybe you have some valuable information. Come back home and we will totally not shoot you. Well, some did, and they were sent to gulags and shot. So in Stalinist era, it was mostly about sending people out of the country.
I think this will have to be the last question, unfortunately, from Marco there.
Yeah, that will be so. And thank you all for being here. I really hope that it's been interesting. How common was patriotism in the Soviet Union? How truly felt was the adoption of communism, and how did it change over time? At the beginning at some point, it was really widespread. If you listen to Mike Duncan's Revolutions or just my podcast about Russian Revolution, you understand that Tsarist regime was done for. It was really terrible, and it was just hated. But after the party took over and started their actions, it really went downhill from there. And Stalin's repression, World War II, of course, made sure that they would believe communism. But I think after Stalin's death, we have to speak about a massive decline and everything. And the worldwide mission thing also was there a sense of worldwide mission. Trotsky had it. Stalin killed Trotsky because Trotsky wanted a permanent revolution. Stalin wanted socialism in a single country. And then he started to oppress the very socialites. We call them socialites as an English kind of pun joke there, to make sure that these people couldn't happen. And the worse, the more it went on, and the more discrepancies we saw from our lives and the lives of other countries, the less people actually started to believe in socialism. And in the end, there were always those about 20 to 30% who bought in all the brainwashing and the TV and the news telling how good it was and how well everything went. But yeah, the numbers just went down, and by the end, I would say it was just like the people who allowed themselves to be disillusioned. And I guess that's it. And thank you for the session.
We will have to stop now, but thank you very much for a wonderful session, Kristaps. Where can the people find you and your podcasts?
On Stitcher, I am sadly not on Agora, but I'm friends with Agora, with Travis and everything. I am on Stitcher and on Acast and on, every good podcast app. It's called Eastern Border. My show is called The Eastern Border. Webpage is theeasternborder.lv. And I'm also on Twitter, Eastern_border, and also on Facebook. But yeah, just look up Eastern Border Podcast. Wait, I'll type it in the chat now with one hand while holding my phone on the other one. Eastern Border. Please go look up Eastern Border, and I'm everywhere, and we're collaborating with nice, friendly people from Agora shows and everything. And yes, I do have a Patreon. Wait, I'll put my phone down for a second. This is Sorry about that. Well, my Patreon is the Eastern Border in one go. Just, replace the slash at the dot. Thank you for asking. And hi, Charles. Nice to see you too. Charles is a listener of mine. But thank you for all this. It's been tiring, and I'll be on the live panel too about modern history later on today. So, and thank you for hosting us and being very kind.
Thank you too. Thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully we'll see everyone in different sessions later on. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. How do I quit?